esteemed guests, dear friends, and courageous advocates, welcome to Freedom Convention Turkey 2025. As the spokesperson of ASD, Hafsa Girdap, I am really honored to be here to share these wonderful people's stories and remarks with you. It's an honor to gather with you today at this critical moment for Turkey and for all who care about justice, dignity, and human rights. We gather at a time when the principles that should protect every human being, freedom of expression, rule of law, equality before justice, are under profound threat. In today's Turkey, unfortunately, these foundations have been eroded by repression, fear, and the relentless silencing of dissent. But if this moment is marked by crisis, it's equally marked by courage. And that courage is reflected in this very room. Before diving into the event altogether, I'd like to invite AST's President Osman Dülgeroğlu to share his brief remarks. Osman Dülgeroğlu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hafsa. Welcome, dear guests and panelists. I would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for being here and supporting this initiative. Turkey stands at a critical turning point with a worsening human rights crisis and erosion of democratic norms. However, how much we can really talk about the existence of the democracy in Turkey today, it's questionable. According to judicial records and statistics of the Turkey Ministry of Justice, from the period of 2010 to 2024, the number of people prosecuted under the terrorism law was 27,000 in 2010 and falling to 21,000 in 2011. And this pattern indicated a relatively limited practices of the terrorism prosecutions until 2014. However, in 2014 marks a turning point immediately following the exposure of corruption and bribery scandals involving the Erdogan's family. With a rapid decline in justice, independence, and systemic instrumentalization of the anti-terrorism law, between 2016 to 2018, around 2 million people were investigated and charged, such as membership of terrorist organization, aiding a terrorist organization, and attempting to overthrow the constitutional order. Between 2014 to 2024, end of 2024, the total number of investigation files initiated by the public prosecutors under the anti-terrorism law and law prevent the attempting to overthrow the constitutional order was almost around 3 million. And the number of the suspects in this period was around 4 million. I personally reviewed all those statistics and noted those numbers. This picture emerges not because Turkey is truly a terrorist paradise, but because terrorism legislation is systematically used to suppress the opponent of the regime and alternative social and political voices. The Freedom Convention unites voices from across the world to comfort these truths, analyze their outcome, and build global solidarity of the freedom, justice, and democracy. This journey started 6 years ago. We have continued this vital work virtually for 5 years, and now here we are finally together in person. Thank you for being here and support this initiative again.
Thank you, Osman. Yes, finally we are here, present in flesh, not virtual. Thank God. As human beings, now able to touch one another, to embrace one another in solidarity and in love. Today we bring together survivors, scholars, journalists, and human rights defenders from across the world, as just my boss mentioned. You are the people who refuse to accept authoritarianism as the new normal. You are the ones who insisted on truth when truth is dangerous, who defend rights when rights are denied, and who keep alive the stories that regimes work tirelessly bury. This year's theme, Turkey at the Crossroads, Democracy and Justice in Focus, reminds us that struggle for justice is not abstract. It's lived every day by women resisting gender-based violence, by minority communities facing discrimination, by journalists who continue reporting despite threats, and by thousands of families torn apart by enforced disappearances, wrongful imprisonment, and exile. Our panels today will confront these realities head-on. We will examine how the legal system has been weaponized, how state violence and censorship crush civic life, and how gendered and ethnic oppression continue to shape the lives of millions. But we will also highlight the extraordinary acts of resilience, solidarity, and resistance taking place across borders and across communities. And through the Silent Screams exhibition that you could see on the right side of the room, we will honor the memory objects and stories of imprisoned, exiled, and lost families. Through the modest part of a huge exhibition that we are organizing, you'd have the opportunity to see those stories a bit more closely, as reminders that behind every statistic, behind every number is a human life, a dream interrupted, and a voice we must continue to carry forward. Dear, brave, compassionate friends, this convention is more than a gathering of witnesses. It's a commitment to truth, to memory, to accountability, and to the belief that Turkey can move toward a future grounded not in fear, but in freedom. Authoritarianism thrives on silence. Today we choose to speak clearly, boldly, and together. Now I want to introduce you my dearest friend, journalist Sehun Kim, as the moderator of this panel, which is titled as Law, Rights and Repression, Authoritarianism on Trial, which will, as I said, examine Turkey's legal system. And Sehun Kim and our amazing, distinguished, esteemed panelists. Thank you.
So, I guess good afternoon, everybody. It is firstly an immense honor to be here and to host and to moderate for the first time the Freedom Convention. And again, thank you to Hafsa, Oxman, and everybody else for giving me the opportunity. Quick little bit about myself. I'm currently serving as the managing editor and the White House correspondent, as well as to the State Department and the U.S. Capitol for Global StratView. And I've been in this role for the past 3 years, and will continue to do so, hopefully into the future. And before, not too much about myself, but just before we move on to our moderators, some have asked me why I'm here, and I think some of you may have heard last time I moderated the events here in this spot. They asked me, well, what is all this to you? Well, my answer to that is very, very simple. As you can see from my name, I am Korean, of Korean descent. I was born there, and my grandfather told me during the war, the Korean War that happened many, many years ago, almost, I think we're hitting 70 years and so forth. He told me about the bond between the Allied forces that were there and the people, and particularly those from Turkey. And from there, the brotherhood has grown up until this day. And, true brotherhood is it exists and it's firm on the ground when we stand with each other on good days and not so good days. And so I'm very honored to stand with all of you today, whether, particularly with the Hizmet community and with all the communities, that were under the oppression with the current political system. And again, it is an immense honor on behalf of myself and so many others like me in my field. So there's a little bit about myself there. Hope you can love to engage more with you after. But before anything, I'd like to just give a quick house rule. If you have cell phones, please silence them or turn them off for the duration of the event. And if you do have any questions, I guess they can either respectfully address it to any of our panelists, or if you have a note card, I'll be happy to accept them during the event. But if you can please be respectful in that regard, we'd be very, very grateful to all of you in advance. So thank you so much. So without further ado, I'd like to just start with our panelists. Firstly, starting with Dr. Murad Khan. Just a bit about Dr. Murad Khan. Dr. Murad Khan is a prolific and innovative and distinguished Turkish scholar with nearly 2 decades of academic experience. He has conducted research teachings across multiple countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Spain, and Israel, establishing himself as an internationally engaged academic. Through his career, he has contributed to over 30 field-based research projects and produced more than 100 scientific publications, while also holding key administrative positions such as elected faculty senator and chair of the department. His research primarily focused on behavioral economics, producer-consumer behavior, choice modeling, and sustainable rural development. And his recent studies at North Carolina A&T State University examines how AI can enhance community well-being and food system reliance. Despite his academic achievements, Dr. Khan was expelled from his university by Erdogan regime for refusing to condemn to politically loyalty demands. His dismissal, driven by his unwavering commitment to academic integrity and freedom of thought, marked a broader pattern of repression against the independent scholars in Turkey. As the regime's pressure and persecution intensified against him and his family, he was ultimately forced to leave this country. Today, Dr. Khan continues his research and advocacy for academic freedom in the United States, emphasizing the role of intellectual independence, evidence-based policymaking, and democratic governance in shaping just and reliant societies. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Murad Khan, who also has a great presentation that he has prepared for all of us. Okay.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, distinguished participants. My name is Murad Cankurt. I'm here is to share with you a very small part of the truth that I have experienced and witnessed. A person's life changed in a single night, with a single sound, in a single moment of the silence. July 16, 2016, less than 1 day after the Cup game, about a third of judges and prosecutors were removed from their posts. Then, region judges and prosecutors carried out arrests based on list they had prepared in advance. Because after just 1 day, arrested all of people. For me, that night changed everything. I was a successful professor. I was passionate about academia. I was a little bit productive, more than 5 times average academic in Turkey. I was a respected figure in my city. I had a stable life. I had a good salary, two young sons, loving wife, peaceful home. I even had a motorcycle, my little escape. I was healthy. It's very important. And all later did I realize I was free man. Uncle knocked at the door. We were sleeping in my home because I had nothing to do with the cow. We woke up with this sound. It was 1:30 a.m. That sound changed my whole life in one night. Then, can I questioning, humiliating, separating fear and anxiety? In short, it's time to face the reality of New Turkey. I was questioned about absurd charges. I was prosecuted for crimes that have never crimes. I was sentenced to 9 years in prison without even being given a chance to defend myself. Even our close relatives and neighbors turned their back on us out of fear. Our bank accounts were frozen. That's why my wife sold everything, my cars, even my motorcycle, to survive and pay lawyer fees. When she applied a job, she was told, if we hire you, we will lose our business. What is the discount? What's the name of this? This is just civil debt. Then, once again, a sound changed my life. It was the echo of my cough on the cold prison walls. My health worsened. In my fourth year in prison, I became seriously ill. We wrote countless petitions to the manager of the prison, to the prosecutors. Nothing happened. It was troubling to breathe and so. I understand that one thing very clear. The system didn't want to make me guilty. It wanted to silence. I wasn't alone in that prison. Around me, university dean, my friends, judge, two hospital director, medical doctor, police chief of the state, high officer, different lives, but same fate. If I am standing here today, it's not just because I survived. It's because as many destiny mates, Victor Frank, said my survival must have meaning. This is not just my and my family's story. This is the story of whole Turkey or entire country. After July 15, according to official figure, 2 million people were investigated. 2 million. 400,000 people were detained. 120,000 people were arrested. 140,000 people fired from the public service, from the job. Each of these numbers represents a human life. A child's cry, a young person's suicide, a supposed pain, a mother's tears, and a father's die in prison. That's why I'm asked to speak only in numbers. What I have shared with you today is just a small part of hundreds of thousands of untold hard stories. One of the most basic principles of international law is no crime, no punishment without love. That is, no one can be punished for an act that was not a crime at the time it was committed. I can tell very well, very interesting story about this for you, but we haven't any time now. However, Turkey, hundreds of thousands were punished for action that were completely legal at the time. Having legal bank account, member of legal union, particularly professional union, legal newspaper subscribing for legal newspaper also, working at the university or going to university, working at the school or going to school. Additional that, your sons or daughters going to school. There's a meaningful quote attributed to Albert Camus. In a world without justice, innocence itself becomes a crime. Basic rules of international law were ignored in Turkey at that time. Throughout history, authoritarian systems have always targeted educator and intellectual first. In psychology, there is a model, coercive control model, has a 3 different stage. First of them is silence, silencing. The other one is isolation. End of the day, full control. For this reason, authoritarian regimes throughout history have primarily targeted academics and intellectual or community leader in order to consolidate their power. A similar model has been observed. This model has been observed in Turkey. 15 foundation universities were closed. 2,000 academics from this university and more than state university, 6,000 academics lost their jobs. Approximately, nearly 10,000 academics were removed from their professional post or jobs. After the fire, academic freedom index down dramatically from 0.6 from 0.09, dramatically down. My fellow destiny, Viktor Frank, he's experienced the Holocaust. They learned the truth, but it didn't change. What is the truth? Truth is, I was not guilty. Clear. Hundreds of thousands like me were not guilty. The patient who died under threat were not guilty in the prison. The children who lost their parents were not guilty. This is not a matter of opinion. This is oppression, clear and undeniably. The rest is up to you. Will you see and witness this injustice, or will you choose to ignore it, as Saramago's novel Blindness, opting for the worst kind of blindness, the voluntary kind of blindness. I know that dark times are not the destiny of society, of country, of Turkey. Justice will ultimately prevail in Turkey too, I hope. Perhaps slow, perhaps painful, but inevitably. I have much more to say, but we haven't run out time. And that's why I offer you all to deepest respect. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. That was thank you for informing us of your personal experiences, and I'm sure there will be many Q&A that will come out of this. Now, next, I would like to invite Miss Andrea Barron. Miss Andrea Barron is the Advocacy and Communications Program Manager at Torture, Abolition, and Survivors Support Coalition International, based in Washington, D.C. She prepares torture survivors, mostly from Africa, to testify at meetings in the United States Congress and the U.S. State Department about U.S. asylum policy and human rights abuses in their countries of origin. Andrea developed TASSC's first Africa project in 2025, supporting the torture survivors and other refugees from Sudan, Eritrea, Rwanda, and in Uganda. She was invited 4 times to be an international human rights observer at a trial in Istanbul where 41 mostly girls and women were being falsely accused of terrorism. Andrea graduated from New York University and holds a master's degree in history from Boston College. She was adjunct professor of history at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia from 1999 to 2015, where she taught courses on Middle East history and global women's rights. Without further ado, please welcome Ms. Andrea Barron.
Thank you. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak at Freedom Convention Turkey and on the Law, Rights, and Repression panel. This is exactly the right time. This is exactly the right time for this event, watching while Turkey presents itself as a mediator trying to bring peace to Gaza and settling the Ukraine-Russia war, while becoming increasingly repressive at home. Just last month, President Erdogan's prosecutor in Istanbul called for Ekrem İmamoğlu, did I say that right? Erdogan's chief political rival, to be in prison for up to 2,352 years. Over 1,000 demonstrators who protested against his arrest were themselves detained. I will be speaking about repression against one segment of Turkish society, those who are affiliated or allegedly affiliated with the Gulen movement, also known as Hizmet, which means service in Turkish. The movement was founded by the late Fethullah Gulen, an Islamic cleric who inspired people with his vision of a humanistic Islam that encouraged followers to be religiously observant, engage in interfaith dialogue, serve others, and commit to a secular education with a particular focus on science and math. The Erdogan regime blames Hizmet for a failed coup attempt in July 2016, although there is no credible evidence that Gulen or his followers planned the coup. After the coup attempt, the Turkish government fired, detained, arrested, and tortured over 100 soldiers, pilots, teachers, police, university deans, governors, and journalists. And sorry if I understated this number. This is just what I was able to get online. I met one of these torture survivors in June of this year during TASC's annual June Survivors Week. My organization, the Torture, Abolition, and Survivor Support Coalition, holds this event every year on or around June 26th, the day designated by the UN as International Day in support of victims of torture. And maybe you can come and join us next year.
With my pleasure.
We train torture survivors to meet with members of Congress and their aides to advocate against torture and other human rights abuses in their countries of origin. The Turkish survivor I met this year in one of the worked for one of the many Hizmet schools established in Turkey and throughout the world. These schools, many of which were forced to close after Turkey's massive assault on the Gulen movement, have been known for the outstanding education they provide students from Turkey to Central Asia to Africa, and I actually visited one here in Chantilly, Virginia, to see firsthand how terrific these schools are. The man, who I'll refer to as M, the Turkish torture survivor, to protect his identity, had never committed a crime or played any role, direct or indirect, in the 2016 attempted coup. but he was arrested, locked up, and brutally tortured. M went into hiding for over a year and slept in parks, mountains, or friends' homes, entirely cut off from his family. Then he was discovered by the police and thrown into the trunk of an unmarked car. He was beaten severely, interrogated about his ties to the Gulen movement. Then he was kept in a dark basement for days, denied medical treatment and food. He was prevented from going to the hospital, even though he vomited blood daily and developed severe joint problems. And I felt very good when after the event, we always worry sometimes about our survivors. We call them survivors of torture rather than victims, but they survived, right? They're survivors, like you. And so we always worry how difficult it might be for them to testify, because this was the first time he testified publicly, but he told me afterwards that it was a great experience, and it was great for him to be with our organization with other survivors who had also been persecuted by their countries. So what happened to him, to M, sounded to me just like the stories I have heard from task torture survivors from Ethiopia, Eritrea, Cameroon, Uganda, Rwanda, and Iran. But Turkey is a member of NATO and considered a US ally. This is why the story of what happened to this man and what I observed in the girls' trial, which I'll discuss now, is so important for people to hear. So I had the opportunity to witness Turkey's massive crackdown on innocent civilians allegedly affiliated with Hizmet when I was an international observer as what has become known as the girls' trial. 41 defendants, almost all teenage girls, female university students, mothers and grandmothers, and there were 4 men also, were arrested in May 2024 and accused of belonging to FETÖ, the Fethullah terrorist organization, referring to the late Fethullah Gulen. It has become known as the girls' trial because some of those arrested in May 2024 were high school girls. Over the past year, I attended 4 hearings in Istanbul. The defendants were falsely accused of, quote, giving and receiving instructions with the intent to commit acts of terrorism by using force and violence. The 41 defendants on trial for, quote, terrorism in Istanbul were not even remotely connected to terrorist activities. I heard the judge questioning the defendants and witnesses many times about why they were tutoring each other in science and math. Hard to believe, isn't it? High school students in Turkey take a very tough exam to enter university, and not surprisingly, the hardest sections are these subjects. So I know they were for me, because I studied international relations, so it was tough, which is why I took prep classes in math before taking the GRE exam many years ago. Some of the defendants I met are brilliant young women studying tough subjects such as engineering, law, and computer science. But the presiding judge did not ask them questions like, did you possess any weapons? Did anyone in your family or your friends have weapons? Did you exchange any messages with people about overthrowing the government of Turkey? Instead, the judge wanted to know why they were studying together, reading the Quran in a group, and going bowling. Since when did bowling become a subversive activity? And I actually did this. When I was in Istanbul, I actually went into a bowling alley to check to see if there were any terrorists, but I didn't find any. There weren't any terrorists there. Maybe I should have gone back another time. The prosecutor's final opinion on the, quote, terrorist activities, including sections on the defendants shopping for groceries together and on their cleaning duties in a house several of the girls shared. This comes actually from the official document by the prosecutor that he sent to the judge. These are quotes. The prosecutor also wrote that the girls were instructed to, quote, pay particular attention to cleaning the kitchen, bathroom, and toilet, as if cleaning is a crime. No questions about whether the girls or other defendants had undergone military training or had a gun in their house. It wasn't about the guns, it was about the kitchen and the bathroom. This past September trial, verdicts were announced for 38 of the defendants. 19 were acquitted and 19 were convicted. Defendants convicted of being, quote, members of an armed terrorist organization received longer sentences than those sentenced for helping the armed terrorist organization, rather than being actual members. Longest prison sentence was 7 years and 6 months. The helpers, quote unquote, the helpers all received sentences of 3 years and 1 month. The lawyers will be appealing the convictions at the Istanbul Regional Court of Justice. We don't know the date yet. Meanwhile, the Erdogan regime has continued to arrest civilians falsely accused of being connected to FETÖ, the Fethullah terrorist organization. In the first 10 months of 2025, almost 1,400 people were arrested for being part of this, quote, armed terrorist movement. I want to tell you a little bit about two of the young female defendants I met in Istanbul. One is a young woman in her 20s who has been identified with the initials SN. She told me about being strip searched down to her underwear, then forced to remove all her clothes. Her lawyer told me that many women accused of association with the Gulen movement were strip searched. No weapon of any kind was ever found in them. But what made SN unique is that she told the judge publicly in court what happened to her. She's from a conservative Muslim family, wears a hijab. Just imagine how difficult it was for her to speak in court about being forced to remove all her clothes. When I asked her, and I was able to meet with a lot of these women separately, I mostly focused on the ones who spoke English. When I asked her why she decided to testify about this humiliating experience, she told me, quote, I wanted to make my voice heard so they don't do the same thing to younger girls who would have had a much harder time with it. SN has been sentenced to 6 years and 3 months in prison because she's one of the ones who was convicted of being a member of FETÖ. AZ is a university student who was acquitted. The judge said there was not enough evidence to convict her, but she's still subject to a travel ban, as is her mother, who was convicted of being a member of FETÖ and got one of the longest sentences. During our last conversation, I asked AZ, this was last night on the phone, I asked how things were going for her at the university after a tumultuous year when she was held in pretrial detention and interrogated by the judge. AZ said she was making new friends in her classes, guided by her belief in Islam as a religion that welcomes others and encourages Muslims to learn from others who were different from them. So I asked her if she could give me some examples of some of these new friends she made. She said one day she saw another student, a woman from the ultra-conservative Ismailia Aha Aga. I'm not pronouncing that one correctly. From that, the ultra-conservative sect of Islam, completely covered in a black abaya. This is unusual in Turkey. AZ had never ever spoken to a woman from this sect. Now she was becoming friends with one. She's also getting to know a student who she thinks is from the LGBT community. Besides saying her daily prayers, welcoming and meeting new people and learning from them, this is what Islam means for her. I want to conclude with a message from Pope Leo XIV. Last month, when the Pope was in Ankara, he encouraged Erdogan to, quote, make Turkey a source of stability and rapprochement between peoples in service of a just and lasting peace. Wouldn't it be wonderful if Erdogan took Pope Leo's advice, not only serving as a mediator between countries, but making peace in his own country with his political rivals and his perceived enemies? He can start by advising the Istanbul Regional Court to acquit the 19 defendants from the girls' trial falsely accused of being part of an armed terrorist group.
Nancy? Thank you, Ms. Mayor, for that wonderful speech. I'm sure we have much to talk about after what you've shared with us today. So lastly, I'd like to invite Ms. Azra Polat. She's among Turkey's injustices, there's someone amongst us who was separated from her father for 8.5 years and experienced that period. I'd like to invite Azra Polat to the stage to talk about the experience that she had during that period. So without further ado, please welcome Ms. Azra Polat.
Okay. While I am quite free from the rest of the speakers, still I am very happy and honored to accept the invitation. At first, I want to thank Hafsa Yulat for offering me this chance. Nonetheless, although our subject is Turkey namely, the discussion we will have will not be just about the consequences of one place. Will be a sign that we are and we will be against all other oppression by the way of standing together. There is a part that is very often neglected, the part that we care for most, but then can become very hostile with the slightest trigger. The children and the society. Our most precious asset, our family, a social group that an individual has no option of selecting to be a part of. It is said that if one wishes to know a person, one has to consider the first in the background. And our family is a decisive factor in our fate. I count myself very lucky that my family is with me today. They're not all there with me physically, however. They are all living and healthy. Sadly, this is not the situation for everybody. For instance, if we had asked same Azra 8.5 years ago, her life would have been completely changed as the person who brought happiness to her life, my dear dad, had been taken away. I do not expect that the majority of you will be able to completely grasp what I'm going to describe, because it will mean that you have to go through something similar, which I really do not wish for you. Let it not happen even to my worst enemy. You can surely put yourself in my shoes though. I was clueless about the situation that day. My mom was in tears for very long. The police had come to our place even before us and wrecked everything, left our stuff in a mess. My brother made it just before my dad was leaving the house. I remember my brother's back being so drenched that his t-shirt was quite damp. I am my dad's girl. He has a kind of walk that he always looks straight ahead, with head held high, that the people around trust him. Nothing happened before or after that day that will make us hang our heads in shame. The number of people like him who were taken is unknown, but many, for sure. Destruction of many lives, and still the process goes on. The memories of my first visit to him are still vivid in my mind. There was a thick glass between us that was impenetrable to the sound of your voice, but you can only use the phone. My dad would sometimes say, I see how many years have gone by when I look at you and your brother, because their time was always the same though. Not much was different within those four walls. My mother is a very strong woman, but she calls her gentle heart. About 3 months after my father was taken to prison, my mother too lost her job. A mother of two, who was a nurse for just 25 years, then started to take care of other kids and cook for them. During this time, we encountered a number of really great people. One cannot possibly recap that era in 10-minute speech, as it would be huge disrespect to the people who were perished during that time. It would be wrong to those who lost their lives. It would be unfair to those who lost their youth, their marriages, their children. As I stated, we are the fortunate ones. All people here are alive. However, a number of them went through very hard times. It is hard to mention all of them, but there were people who lost their families completely, mothers who had to deliver in jails, fathers or mothers who lost their little ones, or vice versa, kids who lost their mothers and fathers. There were individuals who were subjected to torture for days, for weeks, maybe for months. I hesitate to even talk about them because we don't have the ability to tell their stories or understand them completely. Society was divided at the time, and one part kept silent. Why? Because of the fear. The fear of being unemployed, the fear of social savage. They were afraid of being branded as terrorists. Luckily, however, there were some people telling the truth, and they were bearing the heavy loss, not only for themselves, but also for their growth families, for all generation. We did nothing wrong, were the words my father will say at least once every visit. It's truly unfortunate that in our days, every good deed is punished. To those who don't side with the truth, what I say may sound like a buzzing fly right now, but the world is small anyway. Actually, nothing much has changed. The accusations, arrests, and detentions that took place 9 years ago now being directed at a different group. There is no guarantee that tomorrow they won't be directed at yet another group. Even before 2016, there was injustice in these lands. Some people have been waiting for a verdict to be made by the court for years. I want to ask, where were you when these people had to endure such unjust trials? Where were you guys when the sick and the cancer-stricken people were sent to prison without anyone caring? Accusations of terrorism were made against such people with whom you had formerly shared meals, had tea and coffee within their homes, and were the ones creating a rift in society. Instead of giving them support, you all turned your faces away and left. Now, rights, law, and justice are the topics of your conversations. Those who think of justice cannot be described with words. Unfortunately, however, the human race is sometimes in a position where it has to go through some suffering to understand. Every person who claims to be democratic and on the side of justice, wherever they may be in the world, should raise their voice as loudly as possible, within their means and through legitimate means, against even the smallest injustice, the slightest unfairness or oppression, regardless of who is suffering it. We will witness today the refugees created by the oppression everywhere, the people who were forcefully separated from their parents and homes and had no idea what to expect but the hope of freedom. The granting of freedom does not mean that life has come to an end. Yes, we lost a lot of people on this journey, but we are still the ones who know how to live the life because we have taken that path. The losses have been many, but they will not be in a way. A very strong generation is coming, one that will not just go underground with their back cleansed, but one that is slowly but surely warming up. A generation whose footsteps we can hear. My dad told me this when he came to the US last January. In 2016, when the police came to our home, we were actually outside visiting a family friend's parents. My dad could have left if he didn't want to go. He could have run. Because a truly guilty person runs away. They run away from the police, they run away from the court, they run away from being tried. They don't go willingly. But he must have made a choice to be with the cause he believed in, and to live not knowing how long he would be with his fellow comrades behind those four walls. Yes, maybe the process was tough for us, but I am my father's daughter, and I would have done the same. Yes, maybe we are apart now. We have not seen our loved ones for years, for decades maybe, but we will meet again because they're alive and well. Sometimes we choose position over truth. We choose money. Some of us might be atheists, but they still, through their own experiences, know that the truth can never be completely hidden. Even in today's world, where religion or birthplace are used as the basis of discrimination, we should remember that they're solely our destinies. The only thing that is not determined by our destiny is the truth that we opt for. The Bible and Quran keep telling us the same thing over and over again. In Bible, Luke 8:17, nothing hidden will remain secret, and nothing concealed will stay unknown, but will eventually be brought to light and come out into the open. And in Surah Al-Isra, verse 81 says, truth has come and falsehood has vanished. Indeed, falsehood is ever about to vanish. I am my dad's girl. I shall not forsake my beliefs nor what is right, even takes my whole life away. I believe that people must have a stance in life. Every person should have a stance, and I also know that these stances come at a price. For a more beautiful, happy, peaceful, and secure world, you must bear the cost of such stances. My father and his friends who were like my father paid the price for this stance with their lives and their possessions, and they're still paying it. if we have hope for a beautiful future, it is thanks to these people who stand tall. I'd like to close with a question. No matter what the price, can you say that we're willing to stand tall? Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver, for your moving testimony. I'm sure you really helped us to come out so publicly to fight on this issue.
She went first. Okay. I think you're right. There's no shame to walk away. But I think on the other hand, there is a part that keeps us like alive, hope. And I think for me, the hope is him to coming out, which he did pretty well. But some of his friends couldn't. I remember there was a guy, I don't really know him yet, but like we were visiting him, my dad, and then he literally passed out on the ground while we were visiting them. And then I just saw that like it could be happen so easily and like, you know, like this quick. So I think I would say, by the way, I'm not saying that I'd never quit it. I did. I did so many times. I was just like, I'm out, I'm walking away. But I think that's hope. So, yeah.
İnsan çok adaptif bir varlık. İnanılmaz adaptasyon gücü var.
Human as being had such a power of adaptation to something.
Yapamayacağım dediğiniz, dayanamayacağım dediğiniz her şeye veya birçok şeye aslında dayanma gücünüz olduğunu yaşayıcı anlayabiliyorsunuz.
You understand the fact of like when you say that you cannot do it, I could not do this. But when you like get through this, when you like have a chance to label on that, you will understand that you could actually do that way.
Öncelikle aileniz için dayanıyorsunuz.
Firstly, you're standing for your family.
Sonra idealleriniz ve suçlu olmadığınız için dayanıyorsunuz.
Second, because of your ideologies and the belief of that you're not guilty.
Bunun bir diğeri de inançlı olduğunuz için dayanabiliyorsunuz.
And the other thing is that because you're waiting, you're religious.
Benim hastalığım çok geç tedavi edildi. Hala tedavisi devam ediyor yani. Hala devam ediyor.
My sickness has been treated very lately, and it's still in treatment.
Hapishanenin son 2 yılında sürekli acaba çıkabilecek mi yoksa çıkamayacak mıyım endişesini yaşamalıyım.
I have a feeling of if I could make it last, especially like 2 years of his prison life, that if I could make it out or could not.
Fakat bu noktada dayandığım şey temelde inancım, ailem ve doğrularım oldu.
The thing that I was standing on was my family and my beliefs,
İnancım, aile ve doğrularım.
my religion, my family, and my rights. That's all.
Sorry, sir. Okay.
Repression International. Thank you so much for your testimony. The theme here is silence Turkey, and I do feel that there's information here in the US that ordinary people know about or what's going on instead. What's behind those prison walls? Just curious about what your experience has been like to talk to Americans about what is going on there. What things you would like Americans to know about what is going on inside TED, and whether there is still ongoing silencing of dissidents and activists here in America, or elsewhere in the world when they speak about what's going on.
Hapishane anları çok ilginç. Ve öncelikle
Sorry. They said the stories in jail was
en son söyleyeceğim şeyi ilk söyleyebilirim. Hala devam ediyor. Yani hiç hız kesmeden devam ediyor bu süreç.
the last thing that he would say he will put on the first. It's still keep going, the same things. Nothing has been changed. There's still fractions and everything is going on.
İlk gittiğimiz dönemlerde biz şehrin en üst düzey yöneticileri ve tanınanızdık. Şehrin protokolündeydik. Hepsini tanıyorduk. Bunların çoğu da bizi tanıyordu.
They've been like the level of most famous person that in that era that has been like everyone else was know them.
İlk günlerde
On the first days,
o darbe oyununun sıcaklığıyla bize gerçekten kötü davrandılar.
when the oppression of happened in the first place, they actually treated them really bad.
Zorlaştırabildikleri kadar zorlaştırdılar her
Make
şeyi.
it harder as possible as they can.
Normalde yasalara, anayasaya, yasalara ve Türkiye'nin taraf olduğu ve imza attığı yasal sözleşmelerin tamamına aykırı olarak ilk girdiğimizde her türlü hakkımız kısıtlıydı.
They've been treated and accused them all without any kind of like laws and everything, without seeing them at all.
Sonra günler geçtikçe, bizi tanıdıkça tavırları bize karşı değişti. Biraz daha yumuşadı ama bunu bile gizli yapıyorlardı.
By the time when the time passes by, when those people and them meet up with each other, they actually realize like they're good people. So they kind of like treated them a little bit better, but they were still doing it under the hand, like under the table to like not see the presidency and the other stuff.
Fakat bazı aşırı politik, fanatik veya insanlıktan uzak bazı yöneticiler de geldiğinde inanılmaz şartlarımız zorlaşıyordu.
It was getting harder when some like couple of presidents came up to in the jail, especially like the famous ones. So they were like making things harder to like that seeing those are terrorists and you're treating them like what they should have been seeing it.
Aydın sıcağı Teksas sıcağına çok benzer.
There's a city called as Aydın in Turkey. It's hotter than Texas. If they kind of both sort of look alike.
Yaklaşık 10 metrekare bir yerde 10 kişi bulunuyorsunuz. Gelen kötü idareci şu kadar hava aldığımız bir yer vardı. Onu dahi kapattırdı.
So they've been in a place where it was like I think it was Karamida?
A rectangle.
Yeah, it was like a rectangle. That they had like only like 10 meter square feet. And there was like such a place that they were just like seeing the outside and breathing from there. But that president even like closed that window to like let them see anywhere.
Öğlenleri elinizi kapıya dokunduramazdınız. Katiyen dokunduramazdınız. Yani yanlışlıkla değdiği zaman yanıyordu.
You could have not touched your hand on the door of the prison because that was too hot, so that you just couldn't touch it.
Bu şartlarda gidebileceğiniz hiçbir şey yok. 10 metrekare bir yerde 10 kişisiniz.
Under these conditions, you are only like a 10 meter square feet place. There's no space you can walk around. Kaç kişi kalıyorsunuz?
11.
And they will have like 11 people in that place.
Daha anlatacağım çok şey olur ama zamanınızı almak istemiyorum. Spesifik olarak sorarsanız girebilirim.
There's so many things that I would like to talk about, but I don't want to take your time. So if you could ask like a specific questions, I would answer. I think I also want to add something. I just want to ask my dad because he was also at a prison, like 8.5 year. Kaç kişi kalmışsınız? Kaç kişi kalmıştınız?
10 kişi, boşta 34 kişi.
The place that they were staying, they were supposed to, like the capacity of the place is only like 10 people, but they stayed for like more than 30 people in that place for, I think, 1.5 year pretty much. And I remember like, even though I was 10, but I still remember we were talking about like, he was not reflecting anything on that side, but he was saying like, oh, the foods are pretty fine, like we're getting through it, we get used to. But yeah, I think, yeah, I had a picture of someone else's, like the place that they stayed, and I think they were only having he said, like, they only had like a square little window. And I think my dad was feeding the birds from there. It was really cute, yeah.
Question? Well, I know one point, and that I'd like to also bring out is I'll give the rest of the crowd with their questions as well. As Andrea, specifically, it seems like this whole, as outsiders, as non-Turks, when we look at this situation, it sounds ridiculous, right? It sounds ridiculous in the sense that, young girls are going to prison for going to a bowling alley, right? Imagine that happening here, right? I'm sure there's going to be at least 10,000 lawyers just jumping onto this, right? Saying, I'll take it pro bono, right? But it's not happening there. The reason why I'm adding that in right now is because, it seems like complete insanity to anybody that hears this type of case, right? And the amount of the unfair treatment that folks like Dr. Khan and Azra has been, experiencing, it seems so insane that it seems like, my last point is, it seems like, if Erdogan is playing what we call here as the classic high school ostracizing a method, right? Where you're just telling everybody to not hang out with that one particular person because you had a problem with that person, right? But the consequences of that people are paying as a result are either, it seems like, death, imprisonment, torture, and such. So I guess the brewing question for the outside community is, okay, what needs to be done? I mean, you've talked to the survivors, you've talked to folks who are going through all of this mess. I mean, what's your number one message to our general society as Americans specifically, but also really to the administration?
Well, I can say from our organization, we're a very small organization. We only have 11 or 12 people, but we had an outsized influence on U.S. policy on asylum and also human rights issues. And that's the stories of our survivors. And that makes a huge difference. Hearing personal stories, the members of Congress, their aides, the public, hear personal stories that really affects them. So, the stories that we heard today, if your father wants to testify at some point, it makes a big difference to the average American, I think. Because most people are not, when they think about Turkey, they're going to think about, I think Turkey's number 1 or number 2 tourist destination in the world now, right up there with Italy and France. And that's what people are going to think about. How great it is to visit there. They're not going to pay attention to the political situation at all. So I really think that we have to magnify the stories. And then this is a very difficult time to try to talk about human rights issues and democracy in our country. But I still think the message has to be heard, and the consequences for innocent people that are very sympathetic. And that is why the Gulen movement, the Hizmet movement. That's why they focus so much on the girls' trial. Simply because there were so many young girls, university students, women, mothers, grandmothers, and made them very sympathetic. Oh, this has happened to many, many people. And of course, this should not happen to man or anybody, but it made it a more sympathetic audience for people or victims. So I think that people, I guess my idea, whenever we approach Congress, we have to use the head and the heart, because you have to appeal to both. So you need the stories, you also need the statistics, you need the numbers, but you have to do both. And that is how you're going to cut across other messages that people are hearing. It's a difficult time because of the role Turkey is playing diplomatically. It's selling weapons all over the world now. It's tough. We can't look past that fact that it is tough, and that's why I think the stories can make a real difference.
Any question? Yes.
Actually, I'm gonna add on top of what Becky has actually asked. Andrea, you just responded, briefly that I know you have been doing a lot for these survivors of, torture or oppression. But there are a lot of non-Turkish people here or Turkish Americans who have the right and the opportunity to do something beyond what you said. What else can those people do to voice up those people's plights or do a tangible thing as an action?
Well, I think Mehmet, you here?
Which Mehmet? There are a couple Mehmets, in Turkish community.
common name. It's like my last name.
I'll find it. No, okay. No, Ibrahim, that's okay. You can answer also.
Ibrahim, we don't have Mehmet, but we have Ibrahim.
I think one of the things, for example, that Ibrahim, I'm here in Washington, so I can only talk about what we do here in Washington. So we have the Rumi Forum here in Washington, and Ibrahim hosts these incredible galas and other kinds of events and Ramadan events that introduces people to the Turkish community, because they don't know. And when they meet the people, and they always have great food, that's very important, that can help introduce people to who are Turkish Americans, what are some of their concerns, and go from there. And then people can share, at the tables and so forth about what's going on. His events are not, they stress a lot on interfaith dialogue. I think a lot of people would appreciate having these kinds of interfaith dialogues also. And for Turkish Americans, you have to find, as I always tell our torture survivors, you look at your link, find your representative, and you know who it is. But when you do, you contact your representative, you have to find out who is the person who handles foreign affairs. Don't just call up and someone answers the phone and you give a message. Mm-hmm. Find out if they answer. Say who handles, foreign affairs for Senator Van Hollen, who handles foreign affairs for Congressman Jamie Raskin. They'll give you the name of the person. That's the person you should contact. That's the person you should email, because they are handling foreign affairs. You can also write on the website, which some of your concerns are. But keep in mind, and I think you can also reach out to Democrats and Republicans. Human interest stories make a big difference to everyone. And if you don't know a person, if you know someone, it's a terrible thing to say, but if you know someone who is harmed, who is arrested, who is tortured, you know someone, you should share that. If not, share someone else's story, because those stories make a big difference. It makes people pay attention.
Also, I think one of the things that, I'll just add this in as moderator, talked about the Rumi Forum. I had the opportunity to visit as well. There's people of all faiths there. And one thing I've learned is that, and again, it's no turn to you, but again, one of the things I've learned is to call it the Hizmet movement, not call it the Gulenist school.
In Turkey, you have to say the Gulen movement.
Right. They have a lot of names for that, but
You have to say that.
right. So, I bring that up because I think as as a journalist, as a correspondent to the White House, one of the things that really truly just comes into mind is a simple question. You've all shared some amazing testimonies and about the work that you do, but I can't help but wonder, and just in all seriousness, if President Trump is listening to this right now, right, and he Everyone recently was here, and I heard there was a lot of good business deals going on, as he says, right? But I'm sure more conversations and state visits like that will take place. And just out of curiosity and just out of genuineness, and I guess for the benefit of all the journalists like myself, my colleagues at the White House and the State Department, and so on and so forth, if President Trump and Vice President Vance is sitting here right now, what would your message be? Andrea, you want to go first? No. No? Okay. That's fine. And I'll tell you the reason why this is important. It is important because a lot of us who get to meet the president on a press rotation, these are the type of questions are supposed to be. Andrea made a really great point in terms of contacting your representatives. That's their job. But as the job of the media here, it is also our job to ask questions for accountability. And so I guess it's an open invitation for to all of you to partner up with us in that regard. So if you don't have a direct message to President Trump, that's totally fine. But
I think you should ask questions about these human interest stories, about individual people.
Sure.
Individual people. President Trump, did you hear? I mean, I'm just giving the example of the girls' trial because that's what I'm the most familiar with. But I would find examples of people who were teachers, people who were, civil servants, children who had goals out. For example, I'll give you an example. There's the woman, I'm not sure whether she has gone public, but I'll just use her initial A now. And we've seen pictures of her and so forth. So this woman is 52 years old. She's a mother, and she has Parkinson's disease. She received a liver transplant from her son. Her son got asylum in Germany, and she was very, very sick. She finally got released. She's one of the ones that was convicted of being a member of FETO. And profiling somebody like her who's sick, medical diagnosis, and how she has not committed any terrorist attack. She wants to see her son. You'd have to search for some really, maybe Hafsa can help. Hafsa can help find some very, very sympathetic, because she did a great job with me. Very sympathetic characters, like the person that you brought to speak at June Survivors Week. Hear those stories that you think he and Vice President Vance might be sympathetic to. That's the way I would do it. I would not talk about, that's all I want to say. Sure. We work with torture survivors, and we work with immigrants and migrants, and they are at the top of my list, and we have to be sure that they're going to stay safe. So that's all I'll say. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Kant? And it's totally fine if you want to say silent on this issue as well.
Yeah. Bu sorunuz bana Angela Merkel'in bir sözünü hatırlattı. Yanılmıyorsam 2019'lu yıllarda söylemişti.
The question that you bring up remind me of a quote that Angela Merkel says.
İlkelerle kazançlar karşı karşıya geldiğinde genellikle yöneticiler maalesef kazançlar tarafına yöneliyor.
The interest? Okay.
Yeah, interest.
Sorry, I just couldn't remember. The interests and values.
Principles and interest.
I forgot the question.
When politicians have to make a decision between interests and values, they usually choose interests.
Ancak uzun dönemde insan hakları, kanunlar, yasalar ve bunları öne almak uzun dönemde paradan çok daha değerlidir.
but a wrong turn on putting the human rights at the laws in the first place. It is very hard to do. Also, on the other hand, like economically and like, I think it's a
1930'ların sonunda 30'lar boyunca Amerika'ya gelen akademisyenlerin buraya oldukça güzel katkıları olduğunu biliyoruz.
the academics came to the U.S. like early in 1930 had been very hard times in here. We all know that.
Aynen öyle de bu süreçte buraya gelen, Türkiye'den buraya gelen arkadaşların, insanların, akademisyenlerin, öğretmenlerin, gazetecilerin ve bütün bu süreçte gelen herkesin buraya kesinlikle çok faydalı olacağına inanıyorum. Çünkü bu insanlar çoğu itibariyle hayatlarını fedakarlığa adamış olan insanlar.
And also the people who came and also stay coming up into U.S. nor I think Europe or any part of like without any, except the Turkey, any places there to go out and try to do some things. The academics, the teachers, the doctors, anyone else is making such good things, good deeds to show other people that they can make it.
Amerika'ya 2 yıl oldu geleli ve geldiğimden beri hep düşüncem şu. Acaba ben bu topluma nasıl fayda üretebilirim? Yaptığım işin ve kazandığım paranın haricinde nasıl bulunduğum topluma faydalı olabilirim diye düşünüyorum.
It's been 2 years that I've been in America, and then the first thing was popping in my head was, how could I be help to these people in here? How could I make things better for them and not for us?
Kim ne derse desin, Türkiye'de yaşadığımız sıkıntıdan sonra çıkıp bir ülkeye gittiğinizde o ülke sizi kabul ediyorsa onlara biz çok şey borçluyuz.
No matter who says, after what happened in Turkey, and the countries that accept us, what happened after Turkey, we will also be belong to that place anymore, and we will be a part of it.
Politikacıların ne düşündüğü çok önemli değil. Önemli olan halka, topluma faydalı olarak bir şeyler yapabilmek. Ama günün sonunda insan hakları, insan onuru, demokrasi her şeyden önemli. Paradan daha önemli olduğunu net bir şekilde ifade edebiliriz.
It doesn't matter what the politicians are thinking. It's the matter of what the people think.
Human rights
Human rights and
ve insan hakları,
human rights,
demokrasi.
and I think that's all. That's what's the matter, in fact.
Also,
I'm sorry, what was the question?
if to make it easier for Donald Trump and JD Vance sitting here today, like, what was your message?
Okay, I think there's so much, like, so many things to say, but I would rather stay in silent. However, I would rather to talk to a wall towards. I think, yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, I think with that, as we wrap up, I would like to just put in another point. I noticed one of the main character, Kurdish as well, who came to the United States to study. And honestly, the only reason why I knew they were Kurdish was because they were willing to share their culture and their language. But there was no, I would say there was no division until I saw such crackdown happening upon the Kurds even more. They were telling us about their history and how they're once proud peoples in Turkey and they're still struggling to survive. So I think that point needs to be made clear here as well, and that it proves that everyone's a victim under the Erdogan regime. And for all those that are watching or who will be watching this, I I think the only message that we as outsiders can get is that we must educate ourselves on this issue, and at this point it's our duty to listen to individuals like this who have bravely come out to educate us and to help change the things the way it is. So before anything, any comments, questions? Yes.
So, Seyhan, my question is to you. You hear me?
Yes.
Eager. So, we are very close to most powerful politician on this world. Maybe 10 miles?
One block. 1 mile.
So, you are a reporter frequently in White House. So, what is the perspective of the new administration vis-a-vis the human rights issues that we are listening? So, even if we ask, what kind of a response we could get? My question to you, and my question to Professor Murat Can, how would the reaction of your friends from academic, you're an academic, so what was their reaction when you were serving 5 years for nonsense in jail? I mean, that will be great to hear if you had any solidarity and support.
Türkiye'nin inanılmaz bir korku atmosferi var.
There is a atmosphere of like fear in Turkey.
Bu korku atmosferine şöyle söyleyebilirim. Anne babalar bile telefonda sürgündeki çocuklarıyla görüşmek istemeyecek kadar büyük bir korku atmosferi.
That atmosphere of fear is huge as even the parents, like the Waters, could not speak on the phone with their like children's in the other continents, not Turkey.
Hala devam ediyor.
It's still keeping.
3000 çalışanı vardı bizim üniversiteyi.
There was a 3,000 of workers in
Bu 3000 çalışandan hiçbir tanesi benim hakkında negatif bir şey ifade etmedi.
among these 3,000 person, none of them were saying any bad things about me.
Çoğu nasıl olduğunu biliyorum.
And he knows that probably like most of them they publicly cast question about this.
Hatta zorlandığını biliyor.
Even they actually like forced to talk.
Bu zorlamadan dolayı rektörlüğün 5. katından kendini atarak intihar eden arkadaşım diyor.
Who though was it? Louise Brown.
Rectorate
Rector's office.
yeah.
I think the rector's office was on the fifth floor of that building, and because of that fortunate, he just jumped over from that building.
Emin Kömürcüler. Bakabilirsiniz.
The name is Amy Cambridge. Get it check.
Buna rağmen kimsenin bir şey dememiş olması ya da kimsenin aleyhimde bir şey çıkartmamış olması bile yeterli belki. Çünkü herkes zorlandı.
Even to what happened in there, there was no one ever said anything bad about like anyone. Even though that was that fortunate.
Ama onun dışında birebir de denk geldiğiniz zaman yolda eşimin bana ifadesi, birçok arkadaş eşime sarılarak işte destek olduklarını, manevi olarak destek olduklarını söylemişler, ifade etmişler. Hem de hiç beklemediğim insanlar.
However, there were people that he was not expecting anything from them, but to like meet with them in person and being them telling to them to like, we will be with you, we will do anything whatever you need, we will basically stand for you with you.
Şu an ama bunların hiçbirisi benle en ufak bir ya da benim gibi kimselerle hapse girmiş, çıkmış kimselerle en ufak bir kontağa geçmiyorlar, iletişime geçmiyorlar, geçemiyorlar.
Those people who has not had to get a touch for like as much as he does with the hizmet movement, and those people could not even get a touch because of that pressure.
Nasıl geçsinler?
Hakikaten.
Benim eşimi hakim neyle suçlamış biliyor musunuz?
At like, do you know that he was asking a question? Do you know what the prosecutor was sentencing me of the way sentencing his wife, right?
650 defa bir FETÖ'cüyle görüşmek.
Because of what was stated on but 650 times they were getting contact on the phone with one of the tattoo members.
Ne?
Husbands.
Yeah. I say we live in aynı evde yaşadığımızı da söylesek olurdu.
He's saying that I could have just saying like we were in the same house with her.
Çok büyük bir korku atmosferi olduğundan dolayı hiçbirisi açık bir destekte bulunamaz Türkiye'de. Bulunamaz, net söyleyeyim. Yani bulunamadı değil, bulunamaz.
They could not because they could, but they just cannot be with those people who are coming as a member of FETÖ or the leaders of that group because of like the pressure that is still going on and keep reminding.
Thank you. To answer to and with that we will wrap up. But before we do, just to answer your question quickly, I would say this: from my experience with the current administration, it's only been barely a year, and it seems like 10 years in there. And the reason is because we are dealing with an administration that is filled with unpredictability. And with that, and I don't say this in a negative sense, really. I mean, in a way, there was a lot of systematic changes that has happened and is still happening. And I can guarantee you many, many systematic changes will happen in the country because of the policies that are enforced. I think the only thing that I would say is this, is that, to give you a quick example, when China entered the WTO in 2000, they literally made it into policy to delink human rights with ongoing economic partnership with China. And look how it turned out today, right? Uyghurs are going into concentration camps and so many things are happening there. And I think to a point, we are, in principle, we're making the same exact mistake with Turkey, thinking that Erdogan is this one powerful figure and that he'll probably just, with the trust that he'll probably just take care of business in the region. And we sort of felt this when the new Syrian president, Giuliani, visited the White House. I mean, I was there seeing the whole entire thing. I saw his motorcade pulling in, and I saw him even, greeting the Syrian community here, the DMV area. And when I saw that, I said to myself, this was completely unpredictable. And having served in the United States Armed Forces, I know for a fact that there are sergeants that served with me who'll say, we were hunting this guy down for the last 20 years, and yet he gets a great reception at the White House. What a world we live in, right? And so I would say this. I think the only thing and that's the reason why I wanted to ask you this question, is because, when you share these type of messages, it gives us more of a ground as journalists to ask the right questions to the president, like saying, well, we have interacted with victims of Erdogan's regime. Is it going, are we, with the future of Turkey, or Turkey as a new name that are known to us now, are we going to be seeing policies that are linked with human rights? Are we going to hold them to a more of a higher standard? Are we willing to do that as a country? And I think that's a question that needs to be placed forward. But again, I think here, just to finalize, we need all of your help to empower us, the media. I know a lot of us don't do the jobs that you want us to do, and we're guilty of that. But sometimes it's because we don't have enough interactions with folks like yourselves. So we invite you to come and talk to us and help us to put up a good fight. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank all of the panelists for joining us today, to sharing their stories and demonstrating your courage. I'd like to also thank the organizers for having us today to present such important issues to the public. So thank you so much, and please enjoy your coffees and stay till the end. Thank you.
Yes, let's thank the moderator, everybody. You got a great moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.